Before we dive right into the story, please subscribe to this channel for daily stories and also drop a comment for us. Thank you. The afternoon sun slid across the cracked cream paint of the small kitchen, turning every chipped tile into a mirror. Mira stood at the counter in plaid house slippers, rolling dough into imperfect rounds for flatbread. Her fingers moved by memory. Her thoughts floated elsewhere. She could hear her husband Arif humming in the hallway, the melody half remembered from childhood in Dhaka. He had already laid out his freshly ironed uniform for the next morning, the dark navy suit with silver braid at the cuffs that identified him as lead driver in the convoy of Crescent Tech, the fastest-growing technology company in the country. A knock, sharp and official, startled the dough from Mira's hands. She wiped her fingers on her apron and answered the door. A courier, helmet still on, thrust a rigid ivory envelope toward her. "Mira he asked. "Yes," she replied, accepting the parcel. He waited for her signature, then jogged back to his scooter. Its engine coughed once and settled into the chaotic traffic of the street. Mira turned the envelope over. Heavy cardstock, embossed crest of Crescent Tech inside lay a single folded sheet. She slit the flap with a butter knife, curiosity sparking like flint. The invitation glinted gold at the edges. "Founders Ball. You and a guest are graciously invited to an evening of celebration at the Phoenix Hotel Grand Ballroom. Saturday, the 12th of October. 7 o'clock in the evening. Dress, black tie." Below the elegant script, in block letters that someone had typed hurriedly, was the line that hollowed her chest. Guest name, driver's spouse, confirm attendance. No name. No honorific. Not Mrs. Not even Mira. A label, clinical and cold. Mira's pulse pounded in her wrists. She imagined the admissions clerk who had typed it, perhaps with a smirk, perhaps with indifference. Either way, the effect was the same. "You do not belong. You are an accessory to the man who drives our cars, nothing more." The front door squeaked. Arif entered with shoulders rounded forward from years behind the wheel. He carried the faint smell of engine oil and cedar air freshener from the company limousines. "Package?" he asked, wiping sweat from his temple. "Invitation," Mira whispered, handing it to him. Arif read the embossed lines. When he reached the designation, he pressed his lips together so tightly that the color drained from them. He exhaled through his nose. "They meant no harm," he said. "Busy season for events. Probably some intern." Mira watched his eyes. She could see the shame he tried to hide behind casual shrugs. She set a hand on his arm. "It is not about harm," she said softly. "It is about message." The dough on the counter had begun to dry. Mira draped a damp towel over it, her motions gentle. Arif looked at her, wanting to erase the hurt but not knowing how. "I can call the office," he offered. "Human resources, maybe. They will fix the wording." "And what then?" Mira asked. "They will correct it on the seating chart, yes. But the original record will still sit in someone's database. The thought will remain even if the letters change." Arif fell silent. In their years together they had felt many small slights. The mispronunciations of their names at company picnics. The security guard who asked to see dog walking permits when Mira strolled through the executive neighborhood. Those wounds had scabbed over but never healed. Footsteps pattered down the hallway. Their daughter, Mira, 19 and bright with university ambition, appeared in leggings and a loose tee, earbuds hanging around her neck. "What's going on?" she asked, sensing tension. Arif passed her the invitation. She scanned it, eyebrows knitting. "Driver's spouse," she repeated aloud. The words tasted bitter. She took out her phone, thumb flying across the screen. Within seconds she found a digital rendering of the seating plan, leaked by an overzealous event designer on social media. There it was again, in capital letters, pinned beside table 40, near the service corridor. "Mira driver's wife." "It's trending," Mira muttered. "Someone thinks it's funny." Mira reached for a wooden spoon and stirred a pot of lentils on the stove. The aroma of cumin filled the room. She kept her voice level. "I will attend," she said. "Mama." "No," Mira pleaded. "They do not want you there." "Exactly," Mira said, turning from the stove to face her daughter. "That is my reason." Arif looked at her, equal parts fear and admiration dancing behind his eyes. Mira met his gaze, and in that second something unspoken passed between them. Her decision anchored itself like iron. That evening, Mira went to the wardrobe and pulled down a carved wooden box. Inside lay her mother's white silk sari trimmed with silver thread. The fabric smelled of jasmine sachets and old stories. She unfolded it with reverence, holding it to her cheek. Her mother had worn it only twice, at her own wedding and at the school where she received a Lifetime Achievement Award for teaching girls to read. Mira had long saved it for an occasion worthy of its memory. The founder's bull, dripping with privilege, would now witness it. As she draped the sari across her bed, her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from neighbors, cousins, even strangers. Some offered sympathy, some advice, some anger. She set the device face down. The sari's shimmering folds seemed to whisper strength. In the quiet of the night, Mira wrote in her journal, the tip of her fountain pen scratching like a violin bow. They see a label. I carry a lineage. Morning dawned with monsoon clouds thick as charcoal. Arif brewed tea, his hand shaking a little as he poured. He watched Mira choose modest gold earrings and a pair of sandals polished to a mirror shine. Security will be tight, Arif warned. Crowds, cameras, microphones. If you wish, I can request a quieter entrance. Mira smiled. Let them see everything. He nodded, unsure whether to feel protective or proud. Their daughter packed her camera, determined to document the evening for herself. The #driverwife speech had not yet been born, but destiny already traced its outline. On Friday afternoon, Arif chauffeured a group of executives to the airport. From the rear seat they discussed the bowl menu, tossing phrases like foie gras and salmon en croûte. No one mentioned the driver's spouse. The barrier between front seat and back was more than tinted glass. It was a wall of selective vision. At home, Mira practiced walking in the sari, pleating the fabric so that it flowed like water over each step. She rehearsed polite smiles in the mirror, enough warmth to seem approachable, enough steel to ward off pity. She recalled her mother's voice, patient and precise. Dignity is never granted. It is carried. The night before the ball, thunder rattled windows. Mira lay awake, listening to rain-drummer percussion on the roof. She remembered times when leaks forced them to place pots under ceiling cracks. They had patched, saved, and patched again. The house survived. So would she. When dawn came, the storm had passed. The street steamed in sunlit mist. Mira pressed the sari one final time, the irons hissed blending with the kettle whistle in the kitchen. Arif adjusted his tie, a deeper navy than usual. Mira, he said, voice rough. If anything. She stopped him with a touch on his sleeve. We will walk in together. As equals. He exhaled, shoulders relaxing. By 4 o'clock they were dressed. Mira snapped a photo on her phone. Her mother radiant in white silk. Her father dignified in uniform, their hands linked. She posted it with a simple caption, watch them. The post gathered likes faster than monsoon runoff. At 6 they left the house. The hired sedan smelled of leather and lemon polish. Traffic crawled, neon lights reflecting in puddles. As the Phoenix Hotel's marble facade emerged, Mira inhaled. She felt neither small nor nervous. She felt inevitable. A valet opened the car door. Cameras flashed though she was not a celebrity. Journalists expected executives, but intrigue senses contrast the way a dog senses weather. Mira stepped onto the carpet, sari catching lamplight, and the memes began. Who is she? Is that driver's wife? Mira heard the whispers but did not flinch. She walked beside Arif toward the crystal doors, every step stitching her story into the evening. Inside, a grand staircase spiraled upward, garlanded with orchids. Waiters carried trays of champagne that fizzed like bottled stars. The orchestra tuned string instruments, a hush of anticipation. A young woman with a headset met them at the check-in desk. She consulted a tablet. Table 40, she said, not meeting Mira's eyes. Near the kitchen, Mira finished for her kindly, refusing to let the woman twist into apology. She accepted 2 place cards. The first read Arif Amin, chauffeur. The second read driver's spouse. She slipped Arif's into his jacket pocket. She kept her own between fingers, letting its weight remind her why she was here. They descended into the ballroom. Chandeliers dripped crystal tears from a ceiling painted with dawn clouds. Tables gleamed with silver place settings. Table 40 sat against a far wall, partly obscured by a decorative palm. Mira seated herself gracefully. Arif sat beside her, rigid as a soldier. Across the floor, elegantly dressed elite mingled. Laughter rose in champagne flutes. At table 1, near the stage, Celine Roche, head of public relations, glided in a crimson gown, greeting donors with kisses that never touched cheeks. Her eyes flicked toward the service corridor. She saw Mira. She leaned to a colleague and whispered something that made him choke on laughter. The lights dimmed. The CEO, Adrian Veer, took the stage to thunderous applause. He spoke of disrupting industries, of visionary leaps, of global impact. Mira listened, not unkindly. Vision had its place. So did those who kept the engines running. When dinner service began, Mira tasted each course with polite interest. She chatted with a sommelier about tea blends. Arif remained silent, aware of glances darting like mosquitoes. But the worst sting was yet to come. Celine, emboldened by wine and the protective glow of status, sauntered toward a group of junior executives seated directly in front of the stage. She perched on the edge of their table, crossing long legs. "Seriously," she said, voice loud enough to carry yet pitched as if private. "Who lets help into a black tie event? This is not a soup kitchen." Her phrase cut through violin music like broken glass. Several guests laughed, nervous. One woman gasped. A technician in the livestream booth leaned toward his console. The directional microphone had captured every syllable. A red light pulsed. It was already broadcasting. Mira looked up, meeting Celine's gaze across the polished floor. She saw triumph twisting the PR chief's mouth. Mira's spine lengthened. She placed her napkin beside her plate, stood, and smoothed the folds of her sari. Arif gripped her wrist. "You do not need to prove anything." Mira looked at him, love and resolve shining equal. "I am not proving. I am reminding." She released his hand and walked toward the stage, her sandals whispering against parquet. Halfway, a lieutenant of security stepped forward. "Madam, the stage is restricted." Mira continued walking, eyes steady. Something in her bearing made the man step aside. She ascended the stairs one measured pace at a time. The orchestra fell silent. Adrian Veer turned, puzzled. She reached the podium. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying without microphone. "May I speak for a moment?" The hush deepened. Even Celine froze, wineglass halfway to her lips. 2 weeks before the ball, Celine Roche had stood in her glass-walled office on the 15th floor of Crescent Tower, surveying an empire of reflected city lights. She wore a tailored ivory suit that cost more than her first car. Her assistant, Leon, hovered by the desk clutching a tablet. "Run through the seating again," Celine ordered, turning away from the neon skyline. Leon cleared his throat. "Table 1, center, is for the founder, Adrian, his spouse, and our top investors. Table 2 hosts the National Tech Council representatives. Table 3 is—" Celine lifted a manicured hand. "Skip ahead." Leon scrolled. "Table 40, last row near service entrance, currently lists one Mr. Arif Amin and spouse." Celine frowned. "Amin. The driver, correct?" "Yes. He has been with the company 12 years. Why is he invited at all?" Leon checked a note. Employee loyalty recognition. Adrian personally insisted long service staff be allowed a guest seat. Celine exhaled, amused. "So noble." Her tone drip-hunted sarcasm. "Fine. But let us be clear in the record. Label her accordingly." Leon hesitated. "How would you like it listed?" "Driver's spouse," Celine pronounced, crisp as champagne bubbles. "No need for vanity." Leon tapped the tablet. "Done." Celine smiled at her reflection in the window. Power, she mused, was most visible in small humiliations. Anyone could sign a check. Only the truly elevated could adjust the temperature of a room with a single word. Over the following days she oversaw every detail of the founder's ball. The floral arrangements imported from Amsterdam, the custom lighting rig that bathed walls in company colors, the foie gras croquettes plated on artisan ceramic. She approved influencer guest lists and declined a minor celebrity whose brand clashed with the company's image. She rehearsed her own entrance in her mind, the slow glide down the marble stairs, eyes lifted just enough to acknowledge applause. Her team called her the queen of the room, though never to her face. To her face they called her Celine, crisp and efficient. She cultivated loyalty through opportunity and fear in equal measure. When a junior designer misaligned the logo on a digital poster, Celine had the woman reassigned to a satellite office in another city within 24 hours. The message traveled faster than the flight. The morning of the ball, Celine arrived at Phoenix Hotel to inspect final preparations. Staff scuttled at her heels like pilotfish. She gestured to a floral tower. "Raise the central stems by 3 centimeters," she said. "But the height will block line of sight from," the florist began. 3 centimeters, she repeated. The florist nodded, cheeks flushing. In the ballroom, Celine examined the placement of table 40. She noted how the palm fronds blocked it from most camera angles. Perfect. Out of sight, out of mind. At noon, she sat in a corner of the rehearsal space with a laptop, sipping mineral water, finalizing the digital seating chart. She zoomed in on the label, "Driver's Wife." Her lips curved. She took a screenshot, meant for her private amusement, and sent it to her personal group chat labeled in a circle. A minute later, emojis lit the screen. One friend wrote, "At least they get free leftovers." Celine powered down the laptop. She stretched, vertebrae popping. Time for hair and makeup. In her suite, a team of stylists transformed her into a vision of crimson and gold. The gown hugged her figure, an asymmetrical masterpiece that seemed to flow even when she stood still. She studied herself in the mirror, satisfied. As dusk fell, she descended into the lobby, greeted by a ripple of stairs. She basked in it. Outside, flashbulbs greeted her like old friends. She offered practiced smiles, each one calibrated. Inside the ballroom, Celine executed her rounds, greeting venture capitalists, air-kissing celebrity spokespeople, exchanging compliments that evaporated upon contact. When the first course was served, she floated from table to table, anchoring conversations with just the right anecdote, ensuring that her presence felt like a seal of prestige. Then she saw her. Across the room, at table 40, sat a woman in a white sari whose fabric shimmered like morning mist on the Ganges. The woman's posture was regal, chin lifted, gaze calm. Celine narrowed her eyes. How dare a driver's wife carry herself with such composure? The incongruity irritated her. Celine drifted toward a cluster of junior executives who always laughed at her jokes. She positioned herself so that her back was to table 40, yet her voice would carry. "I thought valet parking was outside," she quipped, cocking an eyebrow. The executive snickered. "Wine loosened tongues. If she needs directions, we can show her the service exit," one said. Celine pretended to swat a fly. Bless her heart. She probably thought black tie referred to actual ties. More laughter. A waiter refilled glasses. Celine sipped champagne, the bubbles sharp. She sensed growing restlessness among surrounding tables. Some guests glanced toward the stage, uneasy. Celine leaned closer to her audience, lowering her voice just enough to imply secrecy while ensuring microphones could pick up the edge. "Honestly," she whispered, rolling the stem of her glass between fingers, "who lets help into a black tie event? This is not a soup kitchen." The words escaped, silvery and cruel. They hung in the air. Celine savored the echo. She felt powerful, untouchable. But then she noticed something odd. Heads across the ballroom turned not toward her punchline but toward the stage. The orchestra faltered. A hush fell, heavy as velvet. Celine swiveled. The woman in the white sari was walking. No, gliding toward the podium. Security shifted but did not stop her. The chief executive watched, lips parted. Time stilled. Unease pricked Celine's spine. She set her glass down, the porcelain saucer clinking too loud in the silence. She smoothed her gown, unwilling to be unsettled by a mere driver's spouse. The woman reached the podium and spoke, her voice resonant as temple bells. Celine could not make out every word from where she stood, but she felt the shift in the room's energy, like the moment before the tide reverses. Every eye swung from Celine to Mira. In that instant, the so-called queen of the room realized that the throne was never hers. It belonged to whoever commanded attention. And attention had moved. Celine's jaw tensed. She looked for an exit strategy, a way to reclaim authority. Her mind raced. Damage control, spin narrative, issue apology, blame technical glitch. But a tiny monitor near the sound booth showed the livestream feed and the flurry of comments surging upward like a cyclone. Screen names multiplied. Hearts burst across the display. Hashtags formed so fast they blurred. Celine felt the tremor of power slipping, a silken rope through sweaty hands. She touched her necklace, a reflex of self-comfort. On stage, the woman spoke of dignity, of unseen labor, of pillars that hold ceilings others dance beneath. The audience leaned forward, moths to flame. Celine backed away, heart hammering. She pushed past a waiter and reached a side door. The hallway smelled of detergent and roses. She shut her eyes, inhaled, exhaled. Composure, she told herself. Public relations is perception. Reframe. Regroup. But even as she straightened her shoulders, she knew that the microphone had caught her cruelty, and the internet forgives far slower than it condemns. For a fraction of a second the ballroom remained perfectly silent, as though every throat, every violin string, every chandelier crystal waited to discover its purpose. Mira placed both palms on the polished oak of the podium. The microphones were already live from the executive speech, and their tiny red bulbs winked beneath her fingers. "I will be brief," she began, voice steady yet carrying to the farthest balconies. "You have eaten well tonight. The flowers are exquisite and the music beautiful. I thank the planners for their skill." She paused, letting the compliment land, then tilted her head until her white sari spilled a silver ripple across one shoulder. "Yet something in this room is misplaced. Not a fork or ribbon, but a truth." A low rustle shivered through the audience. Celine, frozen near the sound booth, felt her pulse throb in her temples. Mira continued. "Earlier this evening I opened an envelope addressed to driver's spouse. No name, no courtesy, only a label. In that moment I remembered every person who has ever been reduced to a title smaller than their own story." On screens positioned around the hall, livestream captions transcribed each syllable in real time. Phones lifted. In corners where public relations staff once whispered, executives now stood like school children at inspection. "I am certainly a spouse," Mira went on. "I am proud to be married to Arif, a man who has driven many of you safely to meetings and red carpet premieres while you drafted acquisition plans in the back seat. But I am also a language tutor, a mother, a caregiver to an aging neighbor, and the daughter of a teacher who used her single sari as both prize and pulpit." She told her students that dignity is not embroidered on invitations. It is carried inside the person who walks through the door. A waiter at the ballroom's edge lowered his tray and stared, mist gathering in his eyes. The cameras caught him, and comments on the live stream exploded. "She is speaking for all of us. This is history. Protect her." Mira lifted the place card that still read driver's spouse, and held it so the lenses could zoom. "These words were meant to place me in the background. I have decided to repurpose them. Tonight they will mark the front line of a quiet revolution." The room inhaled as one. "I will not ask for apologies," Mira said, softer now. "They are fragile. I prefer change, which lasts. Change begins with the simple act of looking at the people who oil the gears, drive the cars, polish the floors, type the memos, and realizing that they too own the company's future." She set the card on the podium, careful, almost tender. Then she stepped back. "Good evening," she concluded, and walked down the steps exactly as she had climbed them, graceful, unavoidable. For a heartbeat no one moved. Then applause rose like a storm wind, rolling from table to table until even the balcony shook. Some guests remained seated, palms pressed together at chest level as though in prayer. Others stood, tears cutting unplanned tracks through foundation and mascara. Arif met his wife halfway across the dance floor. He bowed, an old-world gesture that turned cameras toward him. When she reached him he straightened and placed her hand on his arm. Together they walked to table 40, past stunned faces that parted as if royalty were passing. Celine Roche watched with an expression that flickered between disbelief and alarm. The algorithms of influence, once her loyal footman, were beyond her reach. Even before dessert arrived, the first clips from Mira's speech saturated social media. The hashtags multiplied. Driver wife, elegance in white, table 40 truth. Near the orchestra pit the conductor set down his baton and whispered to his first violin, "We have just witnessed a symphony without instruments." Behind the stage Adrien V, the founder, reviewed the playback on a tablet handed to him by a frantic aide. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. He looked up at the aide. "We need to meet her," he said. The aide nodded, already dialing numbers. Rain began to fall as the event ended. Mira and Arif refused the company limousine and stepped into a rideshare. A young driver wearing knockoff sneakers glanced at them in the rearview mirror. He said, voice unsteady. I saw your speech on my phone while waiting in the queue. My mother cleans hotel rooms. She will sleep easier when I show her what you said. Mira placed a hand on the back of the passenger seat. Tell her the rooms sparkle because of her, and we notice. The driver blinked hard and merged into traffic. At home, Mira had stayed awake, laptop open, tracking view counts that leaped in 100,000 increments each refresh. When her parents walked in, she threw her arms around them, then spun the screen so they could see. 20 million views on 3 platforms combined, and the night was not over yet. A message notification chimed. A local journalist requested an interview at dawn. Another ping. A morning talk show in New York wanted a live feed. Mira closed the laptop gently. Tomorrow, she said. Tonight we breathe. They brewed cinnamon tea and left the television off. The neighborhood was quiet except for distant thunder. In the silence, Mira's speech replayed inside her own head, but not as printed captions. She remembered faces, the waiter, the florist who had tried to protect the blooms, and even Celine's momentary flinch of surprise, proof that cruelty can be startled. Mira removed her mother's sari with reverence, folded it along ancient creases, and placed it back in the wooden box. She stroked the lid once. Thank you, she whispered, unsure whether she spoke to cloth, to memory, or to the unseen network of women who had carried invisible weight for generations. Yet even as she prepared for bed, the world outside did not sleep. Screens worldwide glowed with her image. A student in Nairobi set her phone background to a still of Mira at the podium. A factory worker in Sao Paulo replayed the speech during a break, translating the words for colleagues. A professor in Boston drafted a lecture titled The Rhetoric of Everyday Power. By dawn, a revolution had indeed begun, quiet only in the sense that it needed no drums to march. Morning light found Celine Roche awake on her penthouse sofa, still in the crimson gown which now felt like a costume from a failed play. She had tried to manage the narrative while it was still wet clay. She posted a photo carousel titled Behind the Scenes at the Ball, hoping to roll Mira's speech into a broader celebration of employee recognition. The internet read the attempt as spin, and the comments ratioed the post within 15 minutes. Overnight, her follower count dropped by half. 2 sponsors reached out to pause collaborations pending internal review. A direct message arrived from the board's communications advisor asking for an urgent meeting. Celine set the phone down and stared at the skyline, where dawn tinted glass towers gold. She wondered how many more dawns she would greet from this altitude. Across the city at Crescentech headquarters, Adrian Veer paced in his corner office. He had slept only 2 hours, torn between admiration for Mira's composure and horror that his company culture had enabled the insult. He summoned HR, legal, and corporate social responsibility leads to an 8 o'clock meeting. When they arrived, he gestured toward the muted television on the wall. Every channel from finance news to lifestyle talk shows replayed the same clip, the woman in white sari speaking truth to chandeliers. A ticker across one station read Public Relations Earthquake at Crescentech. I want 2 things, Adrian said without sitting. First, we apologize clearly and publicly, today. Second, we address the root. That means examining attitudes at every level. The HR director, an older man whose tie pattern resembled falling dominoes, cleared his throat. We have scheduled listening sessions. We will add bias training modules. Good start, Adrian said. But performative if we stop there. I want structural change. We rise or fall on how we treat unseen people. Outside the glass walls, employees gathered in clusters, watching highlights on phones, debating. Some felt vindicated, others defensive. A junior engineer tweeted, "It should not take a viral video for us to be decent." The message gained 5,000 retweets before lunchtime. Meanwhile, at the Amin household, a line of reporters formed on the sidewalk, umbrellas up against drizzle. Mira made coffee and fielded calls. Arif answered the door and politely declined interviews, citing privacy. Mira sat at the small dining table holding a handwritten letter from a girl in rural Kashmir who had seen the speech and vowed never to let anyone shrink her name. A knock came, softer than the others. Arif opened to find 2 representatives from Crescentech, the chief of staff and a senior diversity officer. They carried no cameras, only a single envelope. After greeting, they asked permission to enter. Mira nodded. Inside they presented the envelope. It contained a letter signed by the founder himself, offering a formal apology and inviting Mira to a closed-door meeting to discuss equity initiatives. Mira read quietly, then raised her eyes. "I accept the apology," she said, "but meetings alone change little. I would rather collaborate on actionable programs." The officers exchanged relieved glances. The senior diversity officer replied, "That is exactly what we hope for." They scheduled a time. As they left, journalists shouted questions from the curb, but Mira simply waved, the gesture neither dismissive nor yielding, just calm. Celine arrived at headquarters through a side entrance, sunglasses big enough to hide half her face. In the executive lift she rehearsed explanations, miscommunication, misunderstanding, momentary lapse. When the doors opened on floor 15, she found her office already occupied by 2 internal investigators from compliance. One stood. "Ms. Roche, please join us in conference room G12. Inside the conference room, a screen displayed a transcript of livestream audio with Celine's remarks highlighted in amber. She felt her stomach drop. "We must discuss next steps," the senior investigator said, voice clinically gentle, as if breaking bad news to a patient. "This includes your statements and the company code of conduct." Celine tried to speak, but her throat closed like a fist. The chair waited behind her. She sat, hearing her own heartbeat louder than the city outside. News outlets began using phrases like moral pivot and corporate reckoning. Commentators compared Mira's speech to landmark protest moments caught on film. A cultural critic wrote, "In an era of viral callouts, the most potent activism may be etiquette weaponized by the marginalized." Memes spread. One featured Mira holding the place card with the caption "Label yourself, world. I am busy being me." Another showed Celine's champagne sip freeze-framed above the words "Pride before livestream." Though Mira declined television appearances, she accepted an invitation from the local public library to speak to high school students the following week. She also opened her inbox to hundreds of scholarship offers for Mira, simply because donors felt compelled to contribute. Mira sorted the messages into folders. She whispered to her mother, "The world is pouring gratitude faster than we can drink it." Mira touched her daughter's cheek. "We will sip only what nourishes." She drafted a public statement, posted on her barely used social account. "I spoke last night because my silence finally weighed more than my fear. Let us lift that weight from everyone." 4 simple sentences, yet the post gathered 4 million likes in 24 hours. At headquarters, Adrian Veer recorded a video apology flanked by employees from every department, including custodial staff and drivers. He spoke for 3 minutes, acknowledged Mira by name, and promised reforms measurable by quarterly reports. The video ended with Adrian stepping aside so Arif, still in uniform, could describe the dignity of labor. The final shot showed both men shaking hands, the sun setting through glass panels behind them. The video trended second behind Mira's original speech. Analysts on finance channels predicted a short-term dip in stock price followed by a likely rebound due to transparent leadership. Some investors labeled Crescent Tech a case study in crisis-turned-catalyst. At home, Mira watched the apology once, nodded, and closed her laptop. She lit a small candle near a faded photograph of her mother and whispered a prayer of thanks. Outside, city buses rolled past billboards advertising the latest smartphone or energy drink, as yet unchanged by the moral tremor that had shifted foundation stones beneath corporate corridors. But somewhere in those buses, passengers spoke of Table 40. Of white silk, of the line between service and servitude turned inside out by a single elegant sentence. On social feeds a new phrase appeared, quietist revolution. It described a movement without slogans, led by those who had long listened rather than shouted. Despite its name, the revolution was not silent. It spoke through thousands of everyday deeds, a receptionist insisting on pronouncing a janitor's surname correctly, a hedge fund partner inviting his driver to lunch at the same restaurant instead of the takeout window, a teenager returning a borrowed blouse with a handwritten note that read, "I see you." That night Mira slept deeply for the first time in years. Arif dreamed of steering a limousine down a road that widened into sunlit plains where no one rode in the back seat because everyone was free to walk beside the vehicle, laughing, unlabeled. Far above the quiet streets, in a tower whose corner lights usually burned till dawn, Celine sat alone at her desk, scrolling through policies she had ignored. The investigators had offered her 2 options, resignation or a lengthy suspension pending review. The crown of the room no longer fit. She closed her eyes and remembered how easily the champagne had tasted. Now every bubble felt like spite returning to sting her throat. She opened a blank document and began typing a letter composed of words she had never before used in earnest. Regret, listen, learn. She did not know if it would be enough, but finally she understood that recovery starts the same way every dinner does, with humility served first. The applause of the ballroom still echoed in Mira's memory hours after she had left the Phoenix Hotel, yet home greeted her with familiar quiet. The sun was only a promise beyond the eastern roofs when the family car glided to the cab. Street lights flickered out one by one as if bowing before the dawn. Arif switched off the engine and rested his hands on the steering wheel. "You sure you are ready for what comes next?" he asked, eyes fixed on their modest front door. Mira touched his shoulder. "Whatever comes, we walk together. That has always been enough." Inside, the house smelled of cardamom from the tea left steeping after the late-night interviews Mira had refused. She shrugged off her coat, folded it across a chair, and went to the kitchen. There she filled a kettle, set it on the burner, and listened to the tick of metal expanding in heat. The silence felt almost ceremonial after the roar of cameras. Mira stumbled out of her room, hair wild halo, pajama shirt crooked. She carried the glow of a laptop screen still blazing with notifications. "Mema, you have 50 new requests in the last hour alone. Morning networks, evening panels, podcasts I have never heard of. People want to fly you across oceans." Mira opened the cupboards, searching for the flowered teacups her mother had gifted on her wedding day. "Let them want," she answered gently. "Wanting is not the same as needing." She set 3 cups on the table. "We will start by needing breakfast." Mira shook her head in baffled admiration. "Most people never get a moment like that and crave every second of its spotlight. You already turned down the biggest talk show in the country." "I turned down noise," Mira corrected. "I have not turned down purpose." Arif drew out a chair and sat, still in uniform trousers but with suspenders hanging loose. His phone buzzed. The driver's group chat was alight with gratitude. He laid the device face down, hands clasped as though in prayer. "I spent years thinking the front seat made me invisible," he said quietly. "Last night I learned it can also be a vantage point." Steam whistled. Mira poured tea, the liquid the color of amber folded in sunlight. "A vantage point is only valuable if we describe what we see to those who cannot look." They sipped in companionable silence until a soft knock sounded. Arif looked at Mira, who nodded. He opened the door to find an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Binter, wrapped in a bright Kent shawl. "I saw everything," the woman said without greeting, tears sparkling. "You spoke for my late husband. He scrubbed floors in the airport lounge 30 years and was still cold cleaning boy on his last day." She pressed a jar of homemade tamarind jam into Mira's hands. "Thank you." Mira accepted the jar as though it were a priceless heirloom and invited her inside. Soon more footsteps approached. The florist who lived 2 streets over, the young mechanic who once helped Arif change a tire in the rain, a retired nurse carrying a pot of stew. They crowded the small living room, filling it with stories of labels they had worn and ones they had shed. Someone began brewing a second kettle. Mira streamed the impromptu gathering on her phone. By the time the clock struck 9, 10,000 people watched live as neighbors recited gratitude. A car horn sounded. A delivery van disgorged several large boxes addressed to Family Amin. Inside were books, flowers, and a handwritten note from a school in rural Odisha promising to mount Mira's speech in their assembly hall. Mira placed the note beside her mother's wooden sorrow-box, understanding that echoes could travel farther than the voice. Just before noon, fatigue overtook her. She retreated to the bedroom, closed the door, and let the noise dim. In the hush, she unwrapped the white sari from its folds, smoothing every crease with patient fingers. She wondered if cloth could store applause the way seashells store ocean sound. When she set it back in the box, she realized her mother's scent lingered stronger than before, as if awakened by its return to daylight. Sleep claimed her, pulling her into a dream where she stood on a shoreline. Waves brought her labels etched on driftwood: cook's daughter, driver's wife, outsider. She picked each one up, turned it over, and placed it into the sea. Instead of sinking, they were transformed into small boats that carried lanterns toward the horizon. When she woke, the image remained like an aftertaste of salt. Evening settled with gentle rain. Reporters still waited outside, though fewer now. Arif cooked lentil soup while Mira drafted polite responses to requests. Mira joined them and suggested a rule: one interview a week, and only if it served a larger conversation about dignity. Mira nodded, relieved to have clear boundaries. After dinner, Arif opened a thin envelope delivered by courier earlier. It was addressed to him this time. Inside lay a certificate honoring 15 years of service, scheduled for presentation at an upcoming employee banquet. At the bottom, a handwritten line read, "Your name will be on the invitation, but your story deserves the stage." Signed by the founder. Arif looked at Mira, voice thick. "I used to think loyalty meant silence. Now I see it can mean speaking, so the people I drive know where the journey leads." Mira squeezed his hand. "And what a journey we are on." They sat on the sofa, tired yet content, as rain thrummed against the windows. No one turned on the television. Instead, they listened to the soft percussion, each thinking of new roads ahead. 6 months later, autumn brushed the city with russet trees and a hush of early sunsets. The furor had matured into steady momentum. Crescent Tech implemented sweeping policy changes, wage audits, mentorship programs, and a quarterly town hall where any staff member could speak. Mira attended the first session as a guest observer. She sat beside junior coders, janitors, marketing analysts, and the security guard who once doubted her pass. When the microphone was offered, she declined to speak, content to hear others find their voice. Public invitations continued to flow. She accepted a handful, always mindful of motive. Her favorites were the smallest, a classroom of 12 girls in a coastal village, a night shift in a textile factory where she read poetry during their meal break. She regarded giant stages with caution, like ornate mirrors that could distract from reflection. One morning an embossed envelope arrived, this time bearing her name in flourishing ink. Inside, a personal letter from Adrian Veer invited Mira to be keynote speaker at the upcoming Women in Technology Gala, a cornerstone event that drew global attention. Mira placed the letter on the kitchen table and stared at it while stirring porridge. Arif and Mira watched her eyes trace the words again. "You said no to bigger platforms," Arif reminded softly. "Why consider this one?" "Because this one is in the same ballroom," Mira answered, voice quiet but firm. "Where label once tried to shrink me. Returning may close a circle bigger than me." Mira clapped once, grin wide. "Imagine the symbolism. Also, great lighting for video." Mira chuckled. "Lighting is secondary to message." She replied to Adrian, accepting the invitation. The planning committee reached out with wardrobe suggestions, transportation offers, prepared talking points. Mira refused most, choosing autonomy. She would wear the same white sari. She would arrive not in a limousine but in the family sedan, driven by Arif. Symbolism mattered, but authenticity mattered more. Weeks flew. Headlines teased her appearance. Bloggers speculated on whether she would replicate the shock of her first speech. Mira ignored the noise and focused on craft. Each night she wrote longhand in a notebook, then read aloud to Mira, who offered edits. They refined metaphors, balanced data with story, pruned adjectives until sentences breathed. On the morning of the gala, Mira rose before dawn, washed her hair in rose-scented water, and pressed the sari with deliberate care. Arif polished his shoes until they reflected the ceiling light. Mira packed a camera and an emergency kit that included safety pins, throat lozenges, and spare batteries. The drive across town felt different from the night of the Founders' Ball. Then the streets had seemed hostile. Now they resembled allies lining the route. Commuters at bus stops recognized Mira and waved. A delivery cyclist shouted, "Give them wisdom." She smiled through the window, humbled. At the Phoenix Hotel, a new banner fluttered above the grand entrance, Women in Tech Gala, building foundations. The same valet who once eyed Arif now greeted him by name and opened Mira's door with a bow. Inside, organizers escorted her to a green room. Unlike the previous event, the space felt warm, decorated with artwork depicting female scientists and engineers from diverse backgrounds. A volunteer offered water and left Mira to change. Alone, Mira unwrapped the sari. She traced the silver border, whispering, "Today you shine under kind eyes." She draped it expertly, fastening the pleats with a single pearl-top pin. A soft knock announced Adrian Veer. He entered with his wife, both dressed plainly despite their status. Adrian extended a small box. A token of respect, he said. Mira opened it to find a simple silver bracelet engraved with the word seat at the table in tiny script. She touched the engraving. You know the name of my foundation, she said softly. Adrian nodded. Funding is available when you are ready to scale. No conditions. The initiative has already inspired internal grants from our partners. Mira thanked him but made no promises. Money, she knew, could be a tool or a tether. She would consider carefully. Minutes later, a stage assistant guided her to the wings. Through parted curtains, she saw 1,000 people seated at round tables, a sea of faces turned toward the lectern. Restlessness flickered in her nerves, but she welcomed it. Butterflies reminded her to fly, not to freeze. The master of ceremonies introduced her with a brief biography that ended simply. Please welcome Mira Amin, educator, advocate, and reminder that names matter. Applause swelled. Mira stepped into light. Cameras shuttered, but she looked first at the technicians along the back wall, nodding in thanks. When the applause faded, she began. I stand here because a ballroom once mistook me for background furniture, she said, voice strong. And because all of you decided that error deserved correction, not concealment. She paused, scanning the audience. Many nodded, a few wiped eyes. I want to speak of ceilings, she continued. Some are made of glass, some of labels. Both are transparent enough to make us dream of the sky while convincing us we cannot reach it. She told the story of her mother teaching village girls to read under a leaking roof, of Arif navigating sleepless highways to ensure executives arrived safely, of the florist who risked orders to preserve the dignity of blooms. Each vignette illustrated how invisible labor stabilizes grand architectures. Midway, Mira shifted tone. Data shows companies with inclusive cultures outperform their peers in innovation and profitability, she said, citing statistics on retention and morale. But let us be honest. We should not need profit curves to justify respect. We should choose dignity because it is right, and let the curves adjust themselves. She described Seat at the Table, her nascent foundation aimed at funding vocational scholarships for spouses of service workers. The plan included mentorship by professionals who once held similar roles. We cannot wait for the world to pull up chairs, she declared. We build our own table, carve our own seats, then invite others with kindness instead of gate codes. The hall erupted in applause that felt like a warm tide. When it subsided, she closed with a story of the driftwood boats from her dream, though she did not name it as dream. Release the labels, she urged. Watch them sail away carrying light we never expect to see again, only to find that same light guiding the path forward. She stepped back, heartbeat steady, face glowing in stage lights. The standing ovation thundered longer than the speech itself. She bowed once, then twice when the applause refused to fade. Backstage, Mira caught her mother in an embrace. You did not just shut them up, she whispered, echoing the viral headline. You opened them. Arif joined, eyes shining. They see the driver now, he joked, though his voice cracked. They will have to invite me on stage next. Mira laughed. You always drove the story. They moved to the gala reception. Guests formed a respectful queue, each wanting a handshake, a brief exchange. Mira listened more than she spoke. A software intern said her parents owned a small grocery and had cried watching the first speech. Mira took the girl's email, promising to visit the store. A senator's aide asked how legislation could support wage equity. Mira suggested starting with mandatory transparent pay bans, then invited the aide to volunteer at her foundation. Celine Roche did not attend the gala. Word had reached Mira that after months of reflection and community service, Celine was mentoring underserved youth in event production. Some called it rebranding, others redemption. Mira chose to call it opportunity, believing people are chapters, not footnotes. As the evening wound down, Adrian announced a surprise pledge, $10 million in matching funds for Seat at the Table, contingent on community partnerships. The crowd cheered. Mira smiled but felt the familiar caution. She would accept only if governance ensured the mission stayed intact. Outside, the city shimmered in reflected moonlight. Mira, still and sorry, exited through the main doors and found a group of hotel staff waiting. Cleaners, cooks, bellhops. They clapped softly. One offered a bouquet of gardenias. The head chef stepped forward. We saved you a plate, he said, lifting a dome tray to reveal warm samosas and mango chutney. Mira thanked them, sharing food on the steps as limousines rolled past. Journalists snapped photos of her seated on marble, laughing with staff. It was the image the world would share the next day, not of a woman elevated above, but immersed among. Later, in the quiet car ride home, Mira unfastened the pearl pin, letting the sari relax. Today felt lighter, she murmured. Arif nodded. Because the weight is not just yours now. Many hands carry it. Mira leaned forward from the back seat. What will you do with matching funds? Design the table, Mira replied. Then sand the edges until nobody gets splinters reaching across. They drove beneath a canopy of autumn branches that shed leaves like confetti, celebrating a road freshly named, though its path had always been there. It only waited for someone to invite the world to walk it. Dawn on the first Monday of the new year found Mira seated cross-legged on the living room rug, surrounded by folders the color of ripe mangoes. Each folder held a proposal from someone who wished to partner with Deceit at the table, vocational colleges seeking scholarships, logistics firms offering pro bono delivery, media groups promising documentaries. Outside, Hamatan dust hazed the sunrise, but inside the house excitement crackled bright and sharp. Arif emerged from the kitchen with 2 mugs of spiced cocoa. Decision day, he said, handing one to her. Mira inhaled the steam. Decision month, more likely. Good partners build bridges. The wrong ones drill holes in the planks. Before she could lift the first folder, the doorbell chimed. Mira hurried from the hallway, tablet in hand. Mama, Head Start Bank is here. Mira rose, sari tucked into plain slippers. In the foyer stood a trio in charcoal suits, the bank's philanthropic director, her deputy, and a lawyer whose briefcase gleamed like obsidian. They bowed, unfolded documents, and announced a $5 million grant, matching Adrian's pledge, to underwrite scholarships for 10 years. The money came with only 2 clauses, permanent logo placement on all foundation material and a seat for one bank executive on the advisory council. Mira listened, nodding slowly. She thanked them, promised a review, and saw them out. Arif eyed the closed door. That sum could sponsor hundreds. True, Mira said, gaze settling on the lawyer's business card. But I cannot swap one sort of label for another. She phoned her friend Nisha, an accountant who moonlighted auditing nonprofits. Nisha arrived by noon, rolled up her sleeves, and dissected the fine print. Clause 3 spooks me, she said, tapping the page. If the board ever rejects an advisory suggestion, the bank may withdraw funds with 10 days' notice. That is leverage disguised as partnership. By evening, Mira drafted a polite refusal. Mira filmed a short video explaining why Deceit at the table would operate on a stakeholder model, funds pooled from many small contributors instead of one controlling patron. The clip went viral among social impact circles and drew a flood of microdonations. Within 72 hours, they raised $500,000 in increments of 10 and 20, each accompanied by messages like "For my mother, the invisible seamstress," or "For the bus driver who taught me physics." But success rarely travels alone. On the 4th day, rumor surfaced. An anonymous blog accused Mira of grandstanding while secretly courting luxury sponsors. A screenshot, cropped to hide her refusal, circulated on social media, showing the Head Start executives in her foyer. Hashtags flipped, hashtable turned, and hypocrisy in white trended. That night, the foundation office, 3 rented rooms above a community clinic, buzzed with staff fielding calls from confused donors. Mira read the blog post twice, noting its clever blend of half-truths. She closed her laptop and gathered the team. Facts are stones, she told them, but stories are the sling that hurls them. We will not answer with bigger stones. We will weave a stronger story. She ordered every correspondence concerning sponsorships published on the foundation website. She scheduled an open-door day, inviting journalists to inspect budgets. She asked Nisha to live-stream a walkthrough of the books. Transparency, she believed, is the best disinfectant. Yet the storm darkened. A tabloid printed a headline, "Driver's Wife Drives Agenda," featuring a photo of Mira adjusting her sari beside a foundation SUV. They implied the vehicle was funded by donations when, in truth, it belonged to a partner clinic. Comments frothed. Arif clenched his fists reading them. "They twist anything," he muttered. Mira touched his arm. "Wind will twist, but trees learn to bend." She turned back to work, but fatigue pulled behind her eyes. 2 nights later, a cyber attack crashed the Foundation website, erasing pages and replacing them with the single-word labels in crimson font. Mira, awake editing video, discovered it first and gasped so loud Mira rushed from bed. They called an emergency Zoom at 5 in the morning. Volunteers patched the site, installed new firewalls, and traced the intrusion to a foreign server farm rented anonymously. By dawn, the site was live again, but staff looked shell-shocked. Mira brewed coffee and addressed their weary faces. Attack spotlight impact. No one stones an empty mango tree. We will keep bearing fruit and reinforce the trunk. She proposed a bold step, launching Deceit at the table publicly in the very square where her mother once taught literacy classes under a tarpaulin, a place of humble beginnings that no headline could spin as elitist. The date chosen, invitation sent, security arranged, the team exhaled and returned to their tasks. Meanwhile, Celine Rush resurfaced. Months of service and introspection had humbled but not silenced her. She requested a meeting with Mira, offering to volunteer logistical expertise for the launch. Arif bristled at the idea. Mira studied Celine's proposal like a detective. Mira, after a night's reflection, agreed, on one condition. Celine would work under Nisha's supervision and receive no credit save a line in the program acknowledging all volunteers equally. Celine accepted without hesitation. The launch week arrived on a clear February morning. The square bustled. String lights crisscrossed bamboo poles. Round tables bore hand-painted signs of sponsor tiers, each a quilt of many names, none oversized. At midday, buses delivered scholarship applicants from villages and inner-city boroughs. They stepped onto woven rugs, eyes wide. Backstage, Celine oversaw final checks, headset askew, clipboard bristling with notes. She hurried to Mira. Stage microphones spark on certain frequencies, she warned. Use the headset, not the podium unit. Mira thanked her and caught a glimpse of the older woman's eyes, less brittle, more searching. The program began with a choir of children whose parents worked as custodians, drivers, street vendors. Their voices rose clear, echoing off nearby apartment walls. A local poet recited verses on names and their weight. Each seat in the square filled. Others perched on ledges and climbed shuttered kiosks for view. Mira stepped to the microphone dressed not in the white sari but in a simple indigo cotton kurta, the color of ink on notebook pages. She opened by acknowledging every rumor head-on. Some have said I court power, she began. They are right. But I court a power that flows upward, not downward. A tide that lifts hands that grease engines and sweep holes, hands too often overlooked until they stop moving. She unveiled the Foundation's first cohort, 50 women and men whose spouses served in low-wage support roles. Each would receive training, seed grants, and mentorship. Partners ranged from local carpenters teaching craft to a coding boot camp offering remote scholarships. None held more than 10% financial stake, by charter. Then she did something unexpected. She invited Celine on stage. Murmurs rippled. Mira spoke. 6 months ago this woman's words wounded me. Today her actions helped build this launch. Redemption is a seat at the table too, earned by work and accountability. Mira turned to Celine. Would you like to say a line? Celine swallowed, stepped forward, and spoke barely above the wind. I labeled someone less than me. The label shrank me instead. Thank you for letting me grow again. She stepped back, blinking tears. The crowd applauded, tentative at first, then resolute. Cameras flashed, but the moment felt intimate despite the lenses. After speeches, stalls opened where attendees could register for programs, receive health screenings, or workshop business ideas. Food vendors, paid fair rates by the Foundation, served jollof rice and chapati rolls. Arif drove shuttle vans for elder guests and laughed louder than anyone when a grandmother insisted he dance. Near sunset, a drone captured an aerial photo, hundreds forming a giant outline of a table, arms linked. The image lit social media like sunrise after storm. Bloggers who had doubted wrote fresh headlines, from labels to legacies. That night the team cleaned until the square was tidy. Mira stood under the last string light, shoulders slumped but eyes alight. She thanked each volunteer, including Celine, who left quietly into the night. Back home, Mira opened her notebook. 20 questions awaited: expansion strategy, measure of impact, safeguarding against future attacks. She wrote a single sentence across the top margin: build wide, root deep. Then she slept, too tired for dreams, wrapped in peace. Spring returned with blossoms clinging to every boulevard tree, stubborn against exhaust fumes. Crescent Tech prepared its annual shareholder summit in the renovated Civic Auditorium, a space once infamous for political rallies now reborn as a forum for corporate accountability. Mira's foundation, though independent, was invited to present impact results because the company had provided matched microgrants once donor diversity met thresholds. Arif adjusted his driver's cap in the mirror. "You sure you want to speak on that stage? Founders, investors, all the old labels." Mira fastened a simple silver bracelet, seat at the table engraved inside. "If labels return, we reprint the room." Inside the auditorium, walls pulsed with lead art mapping revenue streams and sustainability metrics. Yet a subdued current rippled beneath the glossy veneer. Ethical investors pressing for wage transparency, employee groups lobbying for childcare credits, tech journalists sniffing for stories beyond product launches. Backstage, Mira met Adrian V. He offered a warm handshake. "Our stock recovered faster than analysts predicted, thanks in part to credibility your actions sparked," he said frankly. "Hard truth benefited us. I would like the board to hear that from you, unfiltered." Mira nodded. "Then unfiltered they shall have." She waited in the wings as Adrian opened proceedings with market figures and new product teasers. Polite applause followed each slide, but energy spiked only when the lights dimmed for a short documentary. Scholarship recipients learning code, a driver's spouse opening a home bakery, a maintenance worker's partner studying cybersecurity. The final frame showed two hands, one in work gloves, one in a lab coat, turning a wrench together. Applause thundered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian announced, "please welcome the founder of Seat at the Table, Mira Amin." Spotlight found her. She took measured steps to center stage and let her settle. Shareholders inclined forward, executives stilled phones, and the sign language interpreter lifted ready hands. "I was asked to share outcomes," Mira began. "Numbers matter, but numbers alone are doorways without rooms unless we step through their meanings." She clicked a remote. A single slide appeared. No graph, only a phrase. "We saved a seat." Who arrived? 50 turned into 110 within months. 83% found employment or launched ventures. But beyond metrics, something less quantifiable happened. Children slept better because parents returned home with pride. Hallways at this very headquarters now host story nights where cleaners' kids teach executives' kids local proverbs. The audience chuckled, surprised. Profit rose after inclusion, she continued. Correlation is not causation, but possibility is persuasion. When people at every rung feel seen, they contribute not just labor but insight. She paused, breathing in. Yet there is more to fix. Globally, support worker spouses face a 30% higher barrier accessing training. Many still carry labels rather than names. She told the story of Aisha, a security guard's wife who stitched school uniforms at night. With a microgrant, she purchased a second-hand industrial machine, doubled output, hired neighbors, and negotiated direct contracts with 3 schools. She now prints her own labels, Mira said, none of which read just wife. Applause rippled, but Mira lifted her hand to quiet it. This progress sits on a ledge carved by goodwill. If tomorrow we turn away, erosion begins. She advanced to the next slide, an image of a ledger balanced on a knife edge. "I ask Crescent Tech and every shareholder here, bake dignity into budget lines. Fund professional development for every classified employee's family. Not charity, investment. Imagine retention metrics when an entire ecosystem feels advancement is communal." She met the eyes of a venture fund chair known for cost-cutting. "Return on humanity," she said softly. "Compounds faster than shares when crises test loyalty." Silence stretched, a contemplative silence, thick with calculation. Mira let it breathe. Then she concluded. Nameplates shine because someone unmolded brass, polished edges, and screwed them to doors. Remember their wrists when you push those doors. If seats are scarce, build longer tables, not higher fences. The future's profit lies in the hands already holding us up. She stepped back. No one moved. Eye contact passed among board members like a spark across tinder. Finally, a solitary clap rang. Arif, standing at the aisle's rear in chauffeur jacket. The sound echoed, crisp. Another followed, then another, until the room burst into applause that rattled rigging lights. Some rose, others wiped eyes behind management issue glasses. Adrian returned to the microphone. The board will vote on a motion to extend profit sharing to all full-time support staff and establish a family education fund, he announced, voice thick. Gasps rippled. Reporters sprinted for exits to file updates. Investors scanned each other, weighing public image against dividends. The motion passed unanimously within the hour, a first in company history. Outside the auditorium, journalists swarmed Mira. She answered 3 questions, then excused herself to greet the custodial team lining the corridor, offering each a handshake and a laugh. Celine, now communications director for a youth arts charity, texted her a single line. "The room is yours forever." Mira smiled, slipped her phone away, and spotted Arif waiting by a service elevator. He held his cap in both hands, grinning like morning. They walked to the parking garage where the family sedan waited, modest amid sleek electric sedans. On the drive home, Mira live-streamed, camera tilted so viewers saw only road and sky. "Mema," she said for the audience. "People want final words." Mira glanced at rearview reflections of sunlight on windshield glass. "Final words are for endings," she answered. "We are still building chapters. Tell them to keep writing theirs." She reached for Arif's hand on the gearshift. Traffic rolled ahead, city lights flickering like far-off fires inviting stories around new tables. The day the first scholarship cohort gathered for its final evaluation, a monsoon front crawled across the sky. Clouds rolled like charcoal waves above the training center on the outskirts of the city. Inside, desks were pushed into arcs around an improvised stage. 50 graduates sat straighter than flagpoles, faces bright with anticipation and nerves. Mira arrived before sunrise. She walked the corridors touching posters that displayed photographs of the students at work, Aisha bending over her new industrial sewing machine, Kofi debugging code with a grin, Farida presenting a business plan to local investors. The walls vibrated with their hopes. By mid-morning the rain had turned the courtyard into a mirror, reflecting banners that read, "Seat at the table graduation day." Volunteer ushers guided families across planks set over puddles. In one corner a brass band tuned gleaming trumpets. Arif parked the family sedan at the rear entrance, wiped the dashboard, and turned to his wife, ready to watch them fly. Mira squeezed his hand, ready to learn how high. Inside, Celine coordinated media seats with the calm efficiency of someone who had learned to direct attention rather than demand it. She waved Mira toward the backstage curtain. All set. Security triple-checked. Live stream stable. Mira thanked her, then paused. "Has the anonymous blog posted anything new?" Celine shook her head. "Quiet for 3 weeks. Perhaps they lost interest." Mira was not convinced, but today belonged to the cohort. She stepped onto the small platform and the band fell silent. Graduates rose in a wave of color, some in tailored suits stitched from scholarship funds, others in uniforms of their new trades. She welcomed them, voice resonant against the rainfall drumming the roof. "You arrived carrying labels," she began. "Today you leave carrying tools. Use them to carve open doors, and remember to widen the frame for those behind you." Thunder rumbled, as if applauding. One by one the students came forward to receive certificates printed not on glossy card but on handmade paper embedded with wildflower seeds. "Plant it," Mira told each as she placed it in their hands. "Let your growth take root." The hall shimmered with pride. Cameras flashed. Parents wept into scarves. Then, during the final handshake, the power died. Lights blinked out, amplifiers popped, screens went black. Gasps scattered through the dark. Emergency lamps flickered on seconds later, casting the room in uneasy amber. Celine's headset crackled. "Main breaker failure," she reported, eyes scanning ceiling vents. Mira felt a cold knot tighten. She stepped to the microphone, but the battery pack was dead. She raised her voice instead. "Remain calm. We will move outside once rain eases." In the control booth, technicians battled a cascade of errors, backup generators failing to engage, live stream feed dropping to static. A red warning flashed on a monitor. System compromised. Someone had sabotaged the electrical panel. The anonymous blog resurfaced on social media, claiming responsibility, posting that seat at the table was a staged spectacle and that the cohort certificates were counterfeit. Outside, thunder split the sky. Rain hammered the roof. Parents exchanged worried glances. Graduates clutched seed paper leaves. Arif pushed through the crowd to Mira. In the dim glow, his eyes reflected steady confidence. We prepared Plan B, remember? Weeks earlier, after the website hack, Mira had insisted every public event have a low-tech fallback. Arif hurried to the storeroom and returned with battery lanterns, a portable speaker, and a stack of printed speeches. Volunteers passed lanterns along rows. Soft halos bloomed like fireflies. Celine connected her phone to the portable speaker. The audio crackled but held. Mira stepped forward again. Lantern light painted gold across her indigo curtain. A label tried to dim us once, she called above the downpour. Now someone tries to cut our light. So we bring our own. She signaled the band. Brass voices burst into song, undaunted by acoustics. Graduates sang along, stamping feet until the wooden floor rattled. Parents joined, then volunteers, until the storm's roar sounded like distant applause. A technician rerouted the livestream through a cellular hotspot. Viewers worldwide watched grainy footage of a hall glowing with lanterns, filled with singing people refusing darkness. Comments flooded screens. When the rain eased, everyone moved outside. Puddles reflected lanterns in shimmering circles. Mira handed each graduate a small mallet. 50 hands raised. On signal, they hammered wooden stakes around the muddy lawn, each stake bearing a plaque with the graduate's name and trade. As hammers beat rhythm against earth, the anonymous blog tried posting again, but connection faltered. Viewers were too busy sharing the real story. Police arrived to secure the building. Investigators traced the sabotage to a stolen keycard and a rival organization that had bid unsuccessfully for the Head Start money. Arrests followed days later, but in that moment the crowd cared only for celebration. Mira stood with a mirror who filmed the lanterns reflecting in water. Beauty in the flood, her daughter whispered. Roots drink storms, Mira answered. 6 months later, the new seat at the table headquarters opened at an old railway warehouse restored with reclaimed timber and broad skylights. On inauguration morning, sunlight spilled through glass panes so clean they seemed invisible. Workers had spent weeks polishing them in honor of the words etched on the tallest panel. Not just anyone's wife. Always someone's strength. Crowds gathered early. Graduates from the first cohort returned in uniform, guiding visitors through exhibits that showcased their progress. Loaves from Aisha's bakery, coding projects from Kofi's startup, wooden toys shaped by Farida's carpentry co-op. Inside the main hall, a spiral staircase wound around a living tree whose roots sank into a sunken bed of soil lined with stones from villages across the country. Every stone bore a name: drivers, janitors, cooks, gardeners, engraved by family members. The staircase symbolized ascent, the roots, origin. Mira arrived last, not from theatrical flair but because she had spent dawn at the clinic helping a volunteer nurse change dressings for a scholarship recipient injured in a bus accident. She entered wearing the white sari, its silver threads catching morning light like fresh water. Applause rolled through the hall. Adrian V, standing near the tree, smiled. "We kept your promise," he said, pointing upward. Beside the etched glass, a small bronze plate read, "Funded by employees of Crescent Tech, matched by community donations." Mira thanked him, then climbed the spiral, palm brushing the rail polished by drivers during volunteer hours. At the top she turned and addressed the crowd. "This building was born from storms," she began. "Thunder tried to shake our roof, sabotage tried to darken our hole, and fear tried to name us counterfeit. Yet here we stand beneath a roof grown from the hands of those once called background." She gestured to the tree. "Roots remember every step that pressed them. Branches remember every gust that tested them. We are both roots and branches." She invited the first cohort on stage. Each spoke for 2 minutes, telling how the program transformed not only earning power but perception. Parents who once introduced daughters as housewives now called them entrepreneurs. Sons who once had wives' seamstress work now boasted of production lines. As final speaker, Aisha presented a check drawn from her bakery profits, earmarked for the next cohort's toolkits. The hall erupted in cheers. Then Mira surprised everyone. She called Celine to the stage. Celine, now modestly dressed and visibly changed, approached with humility. "I once believed power was seating people beneath you," Mira said, voice carrying. "Celine helped teach me that real power is lifting people beside you." She handed Celine a wooden box. Inside lay a seed paper certificate identical to those given to students, but it read Redemption Mentor. Celine pressed a hand to her mouth, blinking tears. Later, the ribbon cutting took place. Instead of a silk ribbon, they used a chain of paper labels printed with roles: driver, cleaner, cook, assistant, wife. Graduates, executives, and volunteers each held scissors. On Mira's count, they cut the chain together. Fragments drifted to the floor like confetti, swept away by laughing children. In the courtyard, a sculpture stood covered by canvas. A Mira tugged the rope to unveil it, an iron table with seats welded at different heights, symbolizing varied journeys toward inclusion. Engraved around the rim were the names of donors who had given less than $50, listed alphabetically without titles. Journeys continued beyond ceremony. A week after opening, floods struck villages upriver, displacing thousands. Seat at the table mobilized graduates to provide relief. Carpenters built shelters. Coders created an app for missing family reports. Bakers fed crowds. Journalists following the foundation's success filmed the operation. One reporter asked Mira why she led a humanitarian mission outside her charter. She replied, "Labels said we train spouses. Reality says we train citizens. Citizens help wherever tables are overturned." Months later, in the renovated warehouse, evening classes buzzed under skylights. At night, the etched words glowed with internal lamplight, visible to commuters on the elevated train line. Strangers took photographs, posting captions such as, "I pass this every night and remember to respect the unseen." Mira's mother's sari now hung in a recessed frame near the entrance, under a plaque that read, "The cloth that carried a revolution." Visitors touched the glass lightly, as if feeling the fabric's memory. Arif continued to drive, though Crescent Tech offered him management. He said the road still taught him stories worth hearing. He recorded them on a voice memo app, leaving space after each for reflection. Mira compiled these stories into a podcast called Front Seat Horizon, which shot to the top of storytelling charts. One evening as Mira locked the glass doors, she caught sight of her reflection beside the etched letters. She saw a woman older than the one who first held the place card labeled driver's spouse, but also lighter, as if each word traded that night had chipped away unnecessary weight. Celine emerged from the stairwell, carrying rolled charts. "Late night again," she said. "Roots work overtime," Mira answered. They stepped outside. The city hummed, neon blending with starlight. Across the street, a new cafe displayed a sign, "Table Roast," owned by scholarship alumni. Inside, graduates served coffee to commuters while teaching digital skills on donated laptops. Mira inhaled cool air tinged with roasted beans and wet pavement. She thought of labels floating like driftwood boats into the horizon. In their stead sailed vessels carrying seeds, tools, and lanterns. "Not final words," she murmured to herself, remembering her promise on the shareholder stage. "Just another chapter." She turned the key. The lock clicked, and lights inside dimmed to a soft glow, as if the building itself was settling into a peaceful vigil. Hand in hand with Arif, who had walked over after his last drop-off, she crossed the street. Behind them, the glass panel held the message aloft, reflecting passing headlights. Not just anyone's wife, always someone's strength. And in every direction, tables of many shapes waited to be built, each already reserved for those once left standing. A year later, a global study on employee family mobility cited Seat at the table as a model. The report opened with Mira's words, "Build longer tables, not higher fences." The phrase entered management courses, etched not in glass but in fresh minds. And somewhere, a young girl in a rural classroom copied the sentence into her notebook, dreaming of the day she would walk into a room labeled only by the light she carried. The story continues wherever dignity is planted, watered by storms, and harvested by hands determined never again to be unseen.
Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment your thoughts and share our channel with your friends. See you in the next story. From your favorite stories.